on behalf of corporate professionals and my own behalf, I extend a very warm and hearty welcome to all the learned panelists. Some of them we have the veteran Mr. Sudhakar, and all the participants who have joined us in large numbers for today's webinar. Today is 101st webinar on amendments in LODR and consultation paper on review of disclosures for material events or information under Regulation 30 of LODR. I wish to thank all of you being part of our journey and encouraging and motivating us in our knowledge sharing initiatives. Friends, you all know that SEBI has issued a consultation paper. It's a very detailed consultation paper, soliciting comments and views on streamlining the disclosure requirements for material events or information required under Regulation 30 of LODR. The proposals are very far-reaching. They include amendments in Regulation 30 with respect to materiality threshold, materiality policy, change in timelines for making disclosures, verification of market rumors, disclosure of communications from regulatory and enforcement authorities. Second, amendments are proposed in Para A and Para B through additional events, modification of events. And then there are disclosures in relation to cybersecurity breaches or incidents or loss of data or documents in the corporate governance report. The objective of today's webinar is to discuss and deliberate each of the proposals contained in the consultation paper. And we at Corporate Professionals will assimilate, collate all the comments, views on this consultative paper and then forward it to SEBI for its consideration. We have very eminent speakers, very learned speakers today with us for the webinar to share their views on this very important consultation paper. We have Mr. Ashish Kumar, he's Company Secretary and Compliance Officer, Dixon Technologies India Limited, with experience of more than 30 years in secretarial functions. We have our veteran in the profession, Mr. Sudhakar, is former Vice President Corporate and Secretariat at Reliance Industries Limited. He is also Vice President and member of Secretarial Standards Board of ICSI. And he has very vast and long experience with the Reliance Industries. And earlier he has experience with Berger Paints also. We have with us Ms. Saloni Patnis. She is Deputy Company Secretary, Asian Paints Limited, with the responsibility for corporate law compliances for Asian Paints as well as its group companies. We have with us Ms. Shweta Girotra. She is Company Secretary and Compliance Officer, Kalpataru Power Transmission Limited, having a very rich and experience as an in-house counsel, and her experience spans over across technology, digital banking, financial services, telecom, insurance, infrastructure, and real estate industries. We have from NSC with us Ms. Tanvi Walinkar. She is a law graduate and company secretary, currently Deputy Manager responsible for listing compliance, and she's primarily involved in various aspects of price-sensitive information disclosed by listed companies to the stock exchange. And we have with us another veteran, Ms. Anjali Agarwal. She is partner and head capital markets corporate professionals. As to her credit, around 20 years of experience in handling capital market transactions. And then we have Neeti Mangala. She is manager capital market services corporate professionals. Today's what I suggest is that we'll format the webinar like this. I'll request Neeti to give a quick overview of Regulation 30, followed by presentation by Anjali on each of the proposals contained in the consultation paper. And when Anjali presents the proposal and gives her views, the other panelists, the learned panelists, may like to give their comments, supplement what Anjali is presenting. And I will also request all the learned participants, which are joined us in very large numbers, to give their valuable comments and suggestions in the chat box. What we will do is, at the end of the webinar, we will collate all these suggestions, as I said earlier also, and assimilate all that and forward it to the regulator, SEBI, for its consideration. Now, may I request Neeti to give a quick overview of the background of Regulation 30, and then it will be followed by presentation by Anjali.
Yes,
Agarwal
sir.
sir,
Thank you,
Agarwal
sir.
sir, before Neeti goes, can I take 1 minute?
Sure.
Sir, I would like to, in fact, congratulate corporate professionals for organizing 100 webinars right from the time March 2020 onwards, consistently and continuously. This is a commendable job what corporate professionals have done. And immensely the fraternity, professional fraternity got benefited, not only of company secretary, chartered accountants, but other corporate leaders. In fact, on behalf of all the panelists, I take liberty of congratulating once again corporate professionals, and also to express our sincere thanks and gratitude for giving us this opportunity to share some of our thoughts on these amendments as well as the consultation paper. Thanks very much for giving us this opportunity, sir.
Thank you, Sudhakarji, for the sentiments expressed by you. Thank you very much. And it is your encouragement that is motivating us to put in our best in our knowledge sharing initiatives. And I assure you that we will continue this journey of organizing webinars every week, every Friday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Over to you, Neeti, now.
Thank you so much, Agarwal sir. Thank you, Amit sir, for your kind words. Now, talking about consultation paper by SEBI on disclosure of material events under Regulation 30 of SEBI listing regulations. On 12th November, SEBI has come out with this consultation paper. And just to brief, the last date to give the comments by the industry is 27th November, which is Sunday's date. And with regard to this consultation paper, SEBI is quite very keen on regularly, SEBI is continuously coming out with items which are required to be disclosed under Regulation 30. Regulation 30 talks about disclosure of events is particularly of major importance as it enforces one of the pillars of corporate governance. Out of the 4 pillars of corporate governance, which is accountability, transparency, responsibility, and fairness, the pillar for transparency, then compliance for that lies on Regulation 30. As Regulation 30 talks about disclosures, and that too timely, which calls for timely dissemination for information. And this timely dissemination of information curbs insider trading in the sense that events are to be disclosed as and when they occur, which in turn which in turns carries out uniform decision making, uniform dissemination of information in the market, and prudent decision by investors, and in turn robust securities market, which is the ultimate intent of SEBI and capital market regulators. So that is why this Regulation 30 requires quite a review, and there are not much changes, particularly in the structure of Regulation 30 since 2015. There are just increase in line of items in past few years. So this required for review of Regulation 30. Basically, SEBI has received various comments with regard to receipt of delayed disclosures, uniformity, inadequate information, frequent non-compliances, many complaints from investors with replies with regard to rumor verification. Also, concerns have been raised by listed entities as well, because Regulation 30 is quite widened and quite discretionary. It talks about more about qualitative criterias and does not provide for quantitative criteria, which gives lot of discretionary to the listed entities, and that is why which leads to non-uniformity. So all these reasons call for review of Regulation 30. Another is that currently there is no penal provisions under Regulation 30, under listing regulations. For that, the basically SEBI adjudicates these matters on the basis of reports of exchanges and investor complaints. Although companies takes it very lightly in case there are any delays in dissemination of information, but all these are not to be taken lightly, because all these matters any delays are directly dealt in by SEBI. And in various past cases, we have seen a adjudicating officer has been appointed, and companies inquiries and penalties have been imposed. Penalties up to 25 crores are there. SEBI has ordered for forensic audit. Companies and promoters have been debarred from accessing the securities market. So all these penal provisions are quite strict, and companies are required to comply with these provisions in a timely and adequate manner. Next is giving you this was the background of all the reasons for which SEBI has come out with this consultation paper, giving you the overview of current Regulation 30, which calls for disclosure of material events. Regulation 30 provides for disclosure of material events, which are defined in Para A of Schedule 3 and Para B of Schedule 3. This particularly we are talking about equity chapter. Para A of Schedule 3 talks about material events. Para B of Schedule 3 talks about application of materiality. Para A's are deemed material events, which are to be disclosed within 24 hours, and some disclosures have to be given within 30 minutes from the conclusion of board meeting. And Para B, wherein the application of materiality is to be applied, and for which companies are required to formulate a materiality policy. So this is the major part, and this Regulation 30 prescribes our basic criteria for determining materiality policy and determining materiality, for which KMPs and board of directors are authorized to determine the events. These basic criteria are any act or omission which is likely to influence the commercial and economic decision by stakeholders, any act resulting in discontinuation or alteration of any event or information which is already available to general public, any act or omission which, if comes into limelight at a future date, which would result in significant market reaction. So that was the brief gist of Regulation 30. Now moving on to SEBI proposals, I would like Ms. Anjali Agarwal to take further.
Thank you, Niti. I think the underlying what I get is the attempt is to reduce the discretionary part and to provide as far as possible an objective criteria to decide materiality. Now let us have a detailed view of the various proposals. I'll request Ms. Anjali Agarwal to kindly take us through each of the proposals, and after each proposal, I'll request our learned panelists to give their views or comments on the proposal. Over to you, Anjali. Anjali, please unmute. Yes, Anjali.
Am I audible now?
Yes, yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Neeti, for giving an overview of what the Regulation 30 presently is. And when we talk about the disclosures that we made, that we make, what are the regulators' expectations out of the disclosures that any company makes to the exchanges and ultimately disseminates to the public? So, as Neeti said, that there were reasons of why these amendments were needed. Primarily, there was a lot of discretion. Number one, materiality policy of each of the companies when we take up, they all have different parameters. None of the two companies will find similar materiality policies. And as a result of which, companies actually were using a lot of discretion while disclosing the events, especially the ones which are given in the para B of the Schedule 3. So SEBI is trying to make as objective as possible the proposals, and the amendments are proposed. First of all, materiality policy, because that is the crux of the entire Schedule 3 and Regulation 30. In addition to the present qualitative factors which Neeti gave in her initial slides, so SEBI is saying that now the quantitative aspects are also needed to be added to the materiality policy. And as per the proposed discussion paper, if any of the event, if the value of any of the events or expected impact of any of the events exceeds the lower of either 2% of the turnover or 2% of the net worth or 5% of the last 3 years average profit or loss after tax on a standalone basis, then a disclosure is needed to be made pertaining to that activity. Okay. Simultaneously, this materiality policy should assist the employees to identify material events and ultimately escalate it to the KMPs so that a disclosure may be made to the stock exchanges. So SEBI received the views that many a times the KMPs get to know of any particular event as material later as compared to the employees of the company. They get to know faster. So there should be some mechanism or some modus operandi pursuant to which those employees will escalate the matter to the KMPs and then disclosures may be made to the stock exchanges. So I personally feel that when we talk about these thresholds of 2% turnover or 2% net worth, this is comparatively on a lower side, comparatively rather higher for the companies, because when we talk about a material subsidiary also, then also the limits prescribed is 10%. Here we are talking only about 2%. So meaning thereby a company having a turnover of say 100 crores. For a transaction of 2 crores also, a disclosure will have to be made, which to my understanding, the companies might have difficulty. For each and every transaction, there may be a disclosure requirement pertaining to it. Likewise, when we talk about identification of material event for escalation to the KMPs, and even then, there has to be a proper training mechanism so that the employees, the employees can understand that this particular information is material and is needed to be disclosed to the stock exchanges. There will have to be some familiarization program for them, the way we do in insider trading regulations. So maybe other panelists may share their views on these points.
Yeah, thank you, Anjali. I think basically two things. One is the threshold limit and the suggestions on that. And second is that how to train the employees that they carry out this compliance. So the panelists may kindly.
Yeah, Anjali, I agree with you. In fact, I also feel the same thing, that the threshold limits what have been given is too low. It should be at least 10%, if not more. At least it should be 10%, according to me. As you rightly said, that if a company is having 100 crores turnover and 2% of that comes to 2 crores, that means virtually every now and then you have to go on reporting it. That then it loses the importance of the material transactions as such.
Right.
So there is, see, material itself is having a great meaning for that thing. So if you say that 2% is material, then what about the remaining 98%? That is one question. Second thing is that, as you rightly said, and SEBI also felt it, that sometimes the KMPs are not coming to know. By the time they come to know about the materiality of the information, it was getting late. So SEBI was kind enough to make that they have to assist the employees to identify the material event. But instead of that, had they done the way it was done in SDD, same thing here also, by that, let that concerned person be also made responsible. Say, for example, whoever are the HODs are there, if they are coming to know about the materiality within the given time frame, because now the 24 hours have been reduced to 12 hours. So the time is very precious now. So whether it is a 24 hours or 12 hours, it is only a numerical according to me. But the importance is to percolate at every level of the senior management. So some other people apart from the KMP means what? Virtually it is the company secretary who is responsible, because he is the compliance officer. So apart from the company secretary or the compliance officer, some other people, whoever is the person who is raising the transaction, the material transaction, he too should have been made responsible for this. That's what my view is. Thank you.
Okay, so hi, this is Saloni here. I also wanted to add to this. While I'm totally aligned with what Mr. Sudhakar and Anjali and all of you all have mentioned, just another addition to this would be, when it comes to calculating the turnover or any sort of percentages, which are indeed low over here, it also doesn't make sense to only consider standalone numbers. So here, for all of the points, surprisingly, standalone numbers have been mentioned. That actually is a very skewed approach, because a lot of companies may be having really large consolidated operations, and taking a standalone number, the number may also be really small and may not really qualify into what is material information. Companies will instead be burdened with a lot of disclosure requirement, and there would be too much of noise rather than sound, is what this amendment and the materiality matrix which has been right now prescribed gives a picture to me.
Yeah, so I think I am fully aligned with my co-panelist, and just taking clue from what Saloni, from where she left, I think it's a very valid suggestion. Instead of standalone, consolidated. So one, like they have done in RPT and others, if it can be taken to 10% of consolidated turnover, I think that should be some good threshold to look at. Whereas one side, of course, SEBI wants to bring in more clarity and transparency in terms of the para 2 of para B of the regulations 30. But at the same time, I think one should not lose the sight of what one wants to achieve, quality versus quantity. So that's where the threshold limits has to be definitely looked at. The other, just adding on to what has been already said, even the definition of employee, of course, one which Mr. Sudhakar already suggested, and I agree with his suggestion of that the other person should also be held responsible. One is, there has to be clarity on definition of employees also. Who should be employees? Like whether you go as per labor law, even under labor laws, the definition of employees are quite vague and vast. So whom are you considering? That also, that clarity should be added. And also there should be a way more in clarity should be brought in terms of, if a person is informing the concerned officer, what is the timeline that should be there. That should be also prescribed in more with greater clarity in order to make this effective. Otherwise, it is little bit on vague, I would say. So therefore, more clarity is required from my side. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Tanvi here from NSC.
Yes.
The corporates have definitely put on bona fide concerns on the table, which would definitely be taken ahead for consideration. However, we need to know that why this drastic step of quantitative factor was actually brought into the picture is because several times what we have observed is, except for some corporates which follow the best business practices, several corporates would just give disclosures to the stock exchange which they are required under specific provisions. Apart from that, the investors at large, they are not really having any insights of the operations which the companies are going through. So whenever we have raised queries being on the regulator end, we have got a reply that this was not material for the company. And when we see their policy, like Neeti rightly mentioned, that they are so generic, they are just a replica. So, the regulation is there, but it's not really effective. So just to bring the effect of that, there should be some quantitative approach towards the disclosure requirements, which the companies are supposed to follow. Now, talking about quantitative, even I feel that there should be some qualitative approach as well, aligned with quantity, since every industry is different. Every company belongs to a different working style. So that can definitely be taken into account. Now, talking about the standalone approach. So why we are concerned with the listed entities figure is because all this disclosure, they are primarily required to be given to the stock exchanges to inform about what is happening at listed entities end, or for the matter of fact, to its material subsidiary. So no matter the consolidated size of the corporate might be in multiples, but how exactly a particular event is affecting the listed entity, its scripts, I think that also holds a valid point here. Another welcoming change was the maternity policies. The employees should know about it. So I think every team could come up with key areas that affect their working, and can work around the knowledge of this maternity policy and regulatory requirement. That could be achieved.
In fact, Tanvi, I must appreciate that the rationale what you have given for the threshold limits. I do appreciate that, because in 2015, when the listing regulations were enforced, that point of time, I used to caution everyone that para B is to be handled with a great responsibility, because that when you are determining the materiality factor, it cuts both ways. If you inform out of your excitement something which is not material, also it works backwards. It may backfire. And the positive side, of course, anyway, it is there. So now, no doubt about it, I must place on record my appreciation for SEBI for giving that kind of guidance with some kind of threshold limits. But the only thing is, if you see that the threshold limits are too low, 2% is nothing but, in fact, that's what only we feel like. Maybe that corporate professionals may make a submission to, for revising the figures. As I mentioned, that 10% should be a reasonable figure according to me, because I am taking the 10% figure from the material related party transactions. So 10% is the figure. So materiality always is that 10% is the good figure according to me. That's why we may suggest that thing. But at the same point of time, I must say that the initiative what SEBI has taken for giving some kind of guidance as far as the determination of materiality factor for para B, we should appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudhakar.
Great.
I think the consensus is that all the panelists, they are welcoming the point is that how much should be the threshold limit?
Right.
In fact, just to add on the conversation, and Mr. Sudhakar has expressed the view on the threshold and what is the right number or right threshold. If we go back in the year 2014, SEBI has issued a consultation paper when we were determining these thresholds earlier. And when the benchmarking was done with respect to the international standards, the numbers which were kind of considered as a right number were 5% of consolidated turnover or 20% of net worth. Now, if that has been the criteria at that time, and considering this kind of a low threshold, which we are talking about now, is something would not be a right representation or a right number for any listed company to disseminate the information. I agree with Tanvi's view when she's sharing the perspective that if it is about a listed entity, the information should be given to the market, but at the same time, it will bring a lot of information in the market, which may not be very relevant, and it may bring a misleading situation for the investor. If we look at it, 2% of a net profit cannot be a right parameter. You cannot have only the net profit as a parameter to actually disseminate information. So all these factors or all these points should be considered while we are determining about these thresholds. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anjali, please.
Yes, sir. So the next important change is under the present Schedule 3, most of the information, para A information, are needed to be disseminated within 24 hours, except the board meeting items, which are needed to be disseminated within 30 minutes. Now it is proposed that for the events which are originating outside the entity, outside the listed entity, the same are needed to be disclosed within 24 hours. For the events which are arising within the entity, they have to be disseminated within 12 hours of that event, and balance of the board meeting, 30 minutes, remain the same. Now herein again, I feel that 12 hours should be 12 working hours, because if a board meeting is closing at say 6 in the evening, so that would mean that the disclosure is needed to be made by 6 in the morning, which to my understanding would be little difficult for the company secretaries or the compliance officers to meet this 12-hour timeline. Over to all the speakers. Because
good one, Anjali.
they are the industry,
you have put all of us in humor, I think. Good one. That is. I'm thinking that it was a good one. You have put all of us in humor that, if the board meeting is to be over at say about 10 o'clock in the night, and then within 12 hours you have to do, mean the company secretary has to have a sleepless night.
No, but then there is another perspective here, that when we can plan our financials and the other events where 30-minute reporting is there, so there is no issue as far as the acceptability and the capacity is concerned. This we have been doing in the past. It's just that we have to be considerate about the events when we are operating from a different time zones. For if a subsidiary has got an order and it's a very different time zone, how the holding company will get to know, and to what kind of a timeline do they have to follow to disseminate. I think to that extent, we have to request regulator to have a policy or a guideline which consider all these aspects. But I slightly feel that if it is an information of that kind, then why not? It is a very.
I think Shweta is going in very correct direction, that if we can plan our outcome of board meeting, all the events which they have proposed for 12 hours, if we go through, they definitely can be planned. They are not the events which the listed entity would suddenly be faced with. So if these are taken good care of, taken good planning about, I think meeting them within 12 hours disclosure would definitely help the market to have the information on timely basis, and not just that the information is already out there on some social media post or a news article, but the exchange and the investors would have this information firsthand and can take informed decisions. The only thing is we'll have to know when did the information occur. So that, since we're talking about hours here, so that would be some, food for thought, as in when would the information will be recorded as it happened. And now within 12 hours, we have made the compliance. I think that is something, we should really give our comments on.
It seems there is no.
So if our industry friends are okay with 12 hours, perfectly fine. I was trying to be.
You see that, Anjali, let me say that this should not be a big issue as far as the top 500 listed companies are concerned, if I take a figure like that. But certainly the other companies, they will be having some issue, because the 12 hours time, this is, if I am not wrong, this is across to all the listed companies.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
So The top companies, they are very well organized, with all due regards. That other than that, the company secretaries may have a bit of a problem. And but at the same point of time, as I told in the very beginning itself, 24 hours and 12 hours is, according to me, a numerical only. You can do, suppose tomorrow if SEBI says within 30 minutes when you have to give it, we are able to give that 30 minutes thing. So it is a matter of discipline only, as Tanvi and Shweta has rightly said. The company secretaries need to be more organized, well planned, and then we can definitely meet this deadline. It's not a big issue as such, according to me.
It's a question of discipline. I totally agree with Mr. Sudhakar.
I want to add one thing. For items emanating from board meeting, it is okay if you are disclosing within 30 minutes or 12 hours. But the list provided are beyond board meeting items, which are like with regard to frauds, default, any orders, regulatory orders, which company secretary might not be knowing. So that becomes quite difficult as to decide what is the time of occurrence and from where 12 hours has to be counted. All those events will be difficult to be judged. So 12
and also just to add to what Nidhi has rightly put out. Now, to assimilate all those kind of information, and it has to be put out in a manner that is making sense to the exchanges and to the public at large. So that would require a certain time. Like let us assume by the time when the threshold time will start, and to assimilate and put out that information in public will require some time and deliberation. So I think, of course, there is an intent of why it has been done, but it has to be thought through whether it's practicable or implementable in all aspects that one was saying. Just take an example of fraud or some similar situation. Now, one has to assimilate the entire information, put it in a correct manner, and then disseminate to the market. So that would require certain, bandwidth, and also in terms of assimilating the information. So therefore, that this timeline should be looked at is one would request, and if that can also be put out as a suggestion.
So to add on this, I go back to the idea which Mr. Sudhakar said, that it is important for us to sensitize people, let them know what is material, what is not material. Because we also have to see that from a market standpoint, if there is a rumor in the market and it has not been clarified for 12 hours, we can't leave the investor and the market with that kind of an uncertainty for such a long period. For that, maybe we have to be better prepared to understand what is materiality, how it is going to impact the market, and education of our own senior management and people will become a critical element for us to be better prepared to deal with this thing. If I look at it from the intention, from the regulator standpoint, this is how I can interpret this.
To add to what Shweta said, the only thing what I want to say is that, in fact, recently in one of the forum, I have been asked by some company secretaries that the kind of compliances what we have, the compliance officer has to deal with, how to gear up for that. I said only one thing, you have to be a disciplinarian, and at the same point of time, discipline your company also. In fact, that point of time, I have quoted Mr. Deepak Parikh's this thing about a couple of years before when he came to ICSI. He said that company secretaries have to develop the ability to speak up at the board meetings. He said that they have to adopt the speak up culture. That means what? We have to sensitize the boards about the seriousness of the regulator. And then, that discipline has to percolate top down, top to bottom. So at the board level itself, we have to say that, look, when SS1, when it said that 7 days before you have to circulate the agenda, there was a big hue and cry. How can we do that? 7 days before, how can we circulate the agenda? But over a period of time, we got accustomed to that. At the same point of time, as far as I feel that personally, 24 hours and 12 hours is not a big deal. Suppose, for example, if the exams are postponed by 1 week, what big we are going to achieve? Nothing. So we have to understand the regulator's mind also. Maybe the regulator feels that 24 hours is too longer a time as far as the materiality factor is concerned for dissemination. As I think one of the panelists has mentioned about the different time zones in which we are operating. So that's why, no doubt about it. We suppose if the SEBI says, okay, we will give 24 hours, not 12 hours, we are all very happy about that. No doubt corporate professionals may send a suggestion about this thing. But in that, suppose, but we have to be very, as far as I'm concerned, I think that SEBI may not budge as far as this timelines are concerned. This is what my experience with the regulator concerned. Threshold limits, maybe they may consider definitely.
Yeah, so just adding to what Mr. Sudhakar said, just one additional point. We were not aware when this corona happened and pandemic hit us. So we were not aware that such scenarios can also arise. Let us assume for a smaller organization, they run their own setup in one place, and if it has got a, let's say, force majeure situation where fire or something, some incident, whether they'll be first involved in organizing and getting the things out, or first they will reach out to make this announcement to the exchange. So one has to really build some scenarios, look at practical. So one side, of course, everything we want to put the kitchen sink out in public, of course. But what is important and of utmost importance, there has to be certain guidelines to that effect that, yes, this is this, but there can be certain situations where it may not be possible for the company, even there is 100% intent and preparation. Sometimes all the preparations also may not be possible because such scenarios may arise in practical life, because something which we write in theory and what we implement in practical is two different things, and this situation changes. So one has to be really practical and not be, everything cannot be very sacrosanct in that situation. That the one thing is that regulator, if they are making change, that compliances also needs to be enhanced, and people should come and support. Unless you simplify things and not make it so stringent, there'll be lack of compliance from the other side. So therefore, I would say that one has to also see what kind of scenarios can occur, and then probably look at it from that angle. It's not about that whether if it can be done in half an hour, it cannot be done in 12 hours. But the thing is, one has to also look at some real life scenario which might occur in certain companies, because it's, after all, it can happen. Unforeseen can happen. So therefore, that those things needs to be built in before it is rolled out. Is my only submission.
I agree with what Ashish is saying. Sometimes circumstantial things have to be looked into, and just merely saying that it should be intimated within 12 hours or 24 hours. So there may be real-time situations wherein this might not be possible, and some exemption or some provisions should be there, wherein it should not be considered as a non-compliance.
Anjali, if I am not wrong, it is there already. The provision is there. If you are not able to report within 24 hours, the listed entity has to explain the reasons for the same. If I am not wrong, the same is extended even to the 12 hours thing also. By God forbid, because of some force majeure.
Yeah, it will be.
Anjali, please. Next.
Yeah.
Because you have to run through a lot of suggestions.
Right. Now, rumor verification. Presently, it is the company's own initiative to confirm or deny any reported event. But to begin with, the regulator has mandated that for top 250 listed companies, they have to mandatorily confirm or deny any event or information reported in, now these are the important words, mainstream media, including digital media, TV, television, or social media. I'm perfectly in with what the proposal is, but my only concern, while I work as a merchant banker, I feel that many a times there go certain things in social media which really cannot be addressed to, or which becomes difficult. And we as individuals cannot keep a track of what all is happening in the social media framework. There are so many, every day a new site comes up which can give their own comments about a particular transaction which is going on or which the company may be envisaging. So I think social media might be a little concern, but otherwise I'm totally in. I totally appreciate with SEBI's view that these reports or these rumors have to be verified. Over to speakers.
just to give a perspective to what Ms. Anjali said. So this verification of market rumors, what we're talking about, it pertains majorly to those rumors which have impact. Okay, now when we talk about impact, so the listed entities at their personal level, at their individual company level, they can see the volatility, what they're facing. I mean, of course, they can on daily basis they can keep a track of the volumes that are getting traded or the price in which direction it is flowing. Because at exchange level, we definitely have this mechanism where we monitor all listed entities. And I believe a similar mechanism a listed entity can put at their end. So when I think the regulator says that verify the rumor, so so they should actually go out and see what exactly has happened, which has resulted such figures that they are getting. I think that would really help because at a given point of time, a listed entity should really be aware of their standing in the market outwide.
Okay, so thanks, Tanvi. That was like an additional perspective which you added about impact on stock price that these rumors could have. But honestly, that is not something that I see, specifically written in the regulation. So if this is some, intent behind it, it is not how the current wording of the regulation says. So that if SEBI could, probably clarify, maybe it will, tone down the number of disclosures that something like this will warrant. The second thing which I want to appreciate is that they have, mandated this for top 250 listed companies. So of course, these are, companies where systems and processes are in place to follow and track this kind of event or information which is coming in on media, mainstream media, digital media, social media, etc. Plus, there are, given definitions of social media. So, a lot of, say, for example, Instagram, Facebook, etc., does not even qualify as social media for the purpose of a lot of regulations. So, it's not as though you need to track every other website that, puts up some information about you or every other blog post. So, it is honestly not that wide. However, the definition of mainstream media will vary from place to place. So if, they can come up with some guidelines as to how this is to be read, it will really help. And I honestly don't see so much of a challenge in addressing this if all of these basic, drafting issues are addressed. Plus, I want to, lastly conclude that instead of confirming or denying any event information, etc., the wording could be changed to clarify or to comment on it. Because confirm or denying may necessarily, put the listed companies in a spot where in case something is being discussed or is being currently evaluated by the board, before it is finalized or before a decision has come in, they are, required to come up there and confirm it. If they deny, then which means that, it's a false disclosure. And later on, if they come and give a disclosure, SEBI or stock exchanges can definitely get back. So here the language could, probably be changed to clarification or something of that sort. To, at least give the listed companies some leeway in explaining all of these things.
This is a good suggestion. I think
Any other views, or may I proceed?
You can proceed. I fully endorse what Saloni said. Yeah, sorry.
Right.
So just one thing, like that material effect, what Saloni mentioned, it's proposed actually in the amendment. So
okay, wonderful. You're giving us inside news, Tanvi. So thanks.
It's already in the consultation paper. So yeah, we can proceed, Anjali. Thanks.
Now, as we discussed in the beginning, and we all know that Schedule 3 is divided into two parts, Para A and Para B. SEBI proposes to make certain inclusions, new inclusions in Para A. As to any mass communication on behalf of the company to the stock is needed to be disclosed to the stock exchanges and needed to be put on the company's website. And this is again needed to be done within 12 hours. Under the present norms, that are the disclosures which are needed to be made to the exchanges is any communication sent to the shareholders or debenture holders or creditors by way of any notice or advertisement, etc., and the investors' presentations. Just a small point in here as to if mass communication can be defined in a clear terms, it will be easier for the companies to address the compliance part, because otherwise any interview being given by the managing director or CEO may also fall within the ambit of a mass communication. So if this can be clarified by the regulator, that will be helpful.
Anvi, your views?
Yeah, I think a similar set of provisions we already have, like say, for example, all those quarterly calls, etc., the presentations given. So the only intent behind this proposal is that whatever information is being disclosed, which is not readily available on the platform of exchange, should be made available on the platform of exchange in order to avoid the information asymmetry. I think that is the only the concept behind it.
So my limited point was that if any interviews is being given by the managing director on any of the topics.
So I believe it bottles down to no information which is not already available in the public should be shared. And if you share such information which is not communicated, then just communicate it at once. I think it aligns with our prohibition of insider trading objectives as well. Like no insider should be shared without disclosing first.
To the exchange, right?
Yeah. And if you have done, then disclose it at once.
Right. But my only submission would be here. Let us assume that CEO or an MD might be sitting in some other time zone, and he has given or said something in an interview, which by the time it travels to the place, and one has to also review it, whether everything has been put out in public or not. Ideally, it would be. But while you are speaking, sometimes without even knowing, you would have said something, which by this provision would be one would be compelled or would be supposed to inform the exchanges. Now, therefore, what this timeline of 12 hours again would be some kind of a challenge in that sense, because one would have to go through all the interview or let's say whatever has been put out in this digital or other media, and then accordingly the company needs to put out, because unless you have reviewed and also compared to what has been already disseminated out in public, one would not be able to inform. So therefore this 12 hours is little bit on that side. I think if it can be looked at, would be a submission.
I agree. This time zone is something which is, really going to be a challenge for a lot of, these hours thing which have been prescribed, because people may be sitting at various other time zones where this could be, spoken of or discussed. But otherwise, as company secretaries, I think it will, then be a responsibility to educate the people who are, and sensitize them rather, not educate the people who are going out there and speaking to the media to, reiterate something that is already there in by PIT regulations, or that's the general way that restrict or do not make any communication or disclosures which is out not in the public domain by way of these kind of interviews or etc. And if it is done, then it needs to be informed to the stock exchanges. But I agree with Ashish's point that time zone will be a challenge here, or could be.
Now, regulatory action. This is already there in para B, but it is being proposed to be shifted to para A. So what para B right now says is any litigation, disputes, or regulatory actions against the KMP, promoters, or persons in control of the company. Now the scope is proposed to be widened in the sense that regulatory authority, any actions taken or initiated. Now here the word is initiated, which I would want deliberations upon by any of the regulatory authorities, statutory enforcement, or judicial authorities, and the people against whom these actions have been taken has been increased. Listed entity, directors, KMP, senior management, promoters, or any subsidiary as well. which any of these events leading to suspension or fine or penalty or settlement, debarment, disqualification, closure of operations, warning, search, seizure, inspection, or investigation. And again, these information are needed to be disclosed within 12 hours of the event. So when I have my own thoughts on the fine and penalty thing, because many a times it happens that for any of the lapses of listing regulations, a penalty is imposed on the company. It can be results, it can be composition of board or whatever, and which the company is sure that they will be going in for appeal, or they will be applying for penalty waiver or making a representation. So when they talk about initiated, is the disclosure needed to be made at the time when a notice is received by the listed entity, or when the matter gets finally settled? Because giving a disclosure of saying that a penalty of 15 lakhs has been imposed for delay in submission of results or delay in composition of board may be little difficult for the listed entity per se. So I'll welcome my other deliberations as well on this.
I agree with Anjali on this completely, that there are a lot of procedural activities which are inspection in a routine course which happens on an organization. It could be an income tax assessment, it could be an ESI or a PF, or whether it is a normal ROC default, filing defaults. While there are fines and penalties which are coming in the normal course, companies paying, and by way of a payment of penalty, the delay has been kind of regularized. Such reporting of such instances contemplated in this scenario may not be a very practical or a issue which would bring any kind of a logical conclusion on this. I understand if anything material which is impacting the organization should ideally go in the market and investors should know about it. But anything which is procedural, and that too at a stage when it is being initiated, Anjali very rightly pointed out that it is initiated. Something which has just been initiated, it is appealable, it's an order which is going to take time. Company has its own view to demonstrate that why and what has happened. But if we are giving that information in the public domain at the first level of instance, then probably it's going to mislead the market. That's what my view is.
I agree. I fully agree with what Shweta just mentioned, and also probably, applying this overall to subsidiary companies instead of, maybe say material subsidiaries in this case is also really widening the ambit, because companies could have large number of subsidiaries. You're expected to disclose this within 12 hours, and here it is initiation, fine, penalties. It is going to lead to a lot of unnecessary and immaterial disclosure, really defy the purpose of bringing this regulation in. So to that extent, at least, this regulation requires amendments.
Saloni, in addition, when they talk about settlement, so presuming some senior management has done a contra trade under PIT regulations, which is forbidden. So, and he goes in for settlement with SEBI. So even for senior management, I have to make this disclosure. Although at the time when the contra happened, or at the time when it came to the compliance officers noting, it has been duly informed to the exchange. That has to be informed under the PIT regulations as well. But to inform about the settlement as well, that the said employee has gone in settlement with SEBI, there may be practical difficulties in companies to comply with this. And as subsidiary, so I totally agree. It should be material subsidiary only. It should not be a plain subsidiary.
I agree. There are a lot of modifications that
Right.
would be suggested from the industry side to this provision specifically. I also have my reservations about senior management being included in this, because and I think, if I remember correctly, anybody can correct me over here, although this is in relation to the listed company, but there could be, a lot of minor disclosures, and which are, say, for example, if there's a simple instance of a late fee payment which comes in, will also require disclosure over here. So yeah, I fully second what Anjali you just mentioned.
Tanvi, do you have any views of NSC?
Yeah, the thing is, I won't deny, there are certain aspects wherein it is little extra as far as the disclosure requirements are being looked on. But one thing that we miss here is all these action or initiation, they are in person to listed entity. So if your senior management or your KMP is being held under some proceedings initiated by any regulatory or judicial authority, for the matter of fact, so it should be in relation to listed entity. Now, we all know these disclosures are revolving around what is happening under listed entities. So if the listed entity is into picture, and any person associated with listed entity as a KMP or senior manager is being held for any proceeding, that I think would definitely form a material thing to be disclosed. We several times, as far as being a regulator, what I've observed is even ED searches are very common these days. So even that happens, the media takes it up, and the listed entity won't even give any disclosure for that. Now, however, such instances, we have found that the regulation is falling little short. Then how to deal with all those instances wherein the media is forming their own views about it, and we are not really getting anything from the listed entity for that particular event. So thinking about that, I would definitely consider those events wherein all these searches are happening in the normal course of business, as in some regulator is conducting search. I mean, that was definitely something to be looked upon while formulating this regulation. Now, last thing to add on is the proposed timeline is 24 hours. It's not 12 hours. So people need not worry about the haste that they would face. If
Okay, is it 24 hours for this particular provision?
Yes, it's 24 hours.
Okay, I'll correct it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that would be it. Like, if the listed entity is facing or would face in future some impact because of some regulatory action or judiciary action, I think it should be brought in light. But yeah, some sanitization could be done, or else it would be tons of disclosure flowing in this category. That I would also agree.
In fact, Anjali, I agree with Tanvi to a large extent. In fact, one more thing also, if you see that the earlier provision was, it is against the KMP, promoter, and persons in control. If you see, very surprisingly, the directors were missing from this at all. In fact, in 2015, when I was addressing the listing regulations in several forums, I said that as KMPs, we have to congratulate ourselves. Our position has been elevated beyond the directors also. If we have been arrested, that the stock exchanges have to be informed, not for the directors.
Right.
So today we have more company of the directors, senior management, and other people are there. That is number one. Number two, if you see the genesis of Regulation 30, material event means what? It is having an impact on the price of the share of the company. Okay, either way, it is maybe upper side or lower side. Now, when you say that action taken or initiated action means what? As Tanvi has mentioned, there is a search by the ED. And similarly, there may be an arrest also. And okay, before that, you cannot say that when the allegation is proved, then only it becomes material. No, the moment a person has been arrested, it is a material event. It may be an MD, it may be the KMP, it may be a CFO, CS, where it is. So the moment the materiality comes, it is going to affect your share price. It falls under the definition of the Regulation 30. It may be para A, para B, that is all. If it is para A, it is mandatory. Para B, you have to determine the materiality of the event. So that's why I don't think any kind of ambiguity is there or any kind of clarification is required here, to my knowledge. What Tanvi has said, I fully appreciate that. Thank you.
But just to add on, appreciated what Mr. Sudhakar said, but initiation of fines and penalty.
Exactly.
No,
That was
that's my worry, and one would be flooded
Absolutely.
with information. It's not that intent. The company
I'm
would
going to
be
add that.
willing to disclose if it's made a regulation, everybody will comply. So every day, let's say 500 penalties imposed because it is part A, we'll disclose it. So that's where the worry is. So somewhere one has to look at practicality. Again, I'm repeating the word practicality has to be seen. Of course, all changes are welcome and always welcome, and that's how we evolve. But again, one has to really look how practically it can be implemented so that the compliance is there in both letters and spirit. So that's where one has to. I would request the regulators to look at and urge that, because
yeah.
the smallest of penalty fines would be a challenge here.
Even when I said initiated was specifically with regard to fine and penalty only. Rest all, yes, of course, they are all big things have to be intimated to the regulator and to the public.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, Anjali.
Next point. Yeah. Now, MD or CEO in an indisposed position or not being available for a period of 1 month has to be disclosed to the stock exchanges within 12 hours. A totally welcome suggestion. The only thing is the word used is unavailable. Maybe that can be elaborated a bit, because when I read it for the first time, I got a feeling that if the MD or CFO goes for a vacation for a month, even then, because of the word unavailable, indisposed, I had missed out at that point in time. So if this word can be corrected or it can be elaborated better, that is the only suggestion I have. Otherwise, perfectly fine. This is needed to be disclosed to the market at large.
I think this is a welcome change. I think, of course, as an entity, you would want that. But
Right.
only thing, again, I would say and urge is when that 12 hours starts, let us assume that, of course, a CEO travels and he is on a vacation with his family. But unfortunately, he's in a different time zone and in a different part of the world. And unfortunately, he meets an accident. And by the time the information reaches and or does not reach, and how the company would come to know that now from here on he will be indisposed and he'll not be able to discharge his duty. So that again, some clarifications or some provisions need to be provided so that those situations can also be inbuilt into while considering this, and also some bit of clarity when it will be considered that he is indisposed, whether at the start of his vacation or in between something happens, from there on it will be considered as indisposed. So that's again some bit of clarity would be required. But otherwise, of course, fully appreciate it's a welcome change.
I agree with Ashish completely. This is something which requires a little bit of a clarification.
Shweta, you'll have to be a bit louder.
So I'm saying I agree with Ashish.
Yeah.
Something which is a welcome step, but a little more clarity would be helpful. Am I audible properly, Anjali?
Yeah, you were. Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, with regard to change in KMP and resignations, so the present provision is any change in directors, KMP, auditors, compliance officer, or senior management. Senior management was not there earlier, it has been included. With regard to resignations of independent directors, KMP, senior management, and directors, the resignation letter and the reason for their resignation is needed to be given to the exchanges within a period of 7 days from the date of resignation. While reading this provision, otherwise it's again a welcome step. People should be aware that why these senior people are resigning on or leaving the organization. But while I was going through this provision and I was preparing for this presentation, I just did a general search. Within last 7 days only, there have been more than 21 resignations of KMPs. So that means the companies will have to keep on informing the resignation details to the exchange along with the reason for resignation, because KMP resignation might be a common thing. Independent directors, senior management is not very common, but KMP resignation might be a common phenomena. So giving the recent resignation letter to the exchange may be looked into.
Anjali, I'm sorry to, I may not be able to agree with you. As far as KMP is concerned, you cannot take KMP position that simple. KMPs cannot change day in, day out. If a CFO is resigning from a company, it should send some alarm bells. Why the CFO is resigning from the company? At the same point of time, CEO also is a part of KMP. Managing director is a part of KMP. Only thing is that, yes, with all due regards to our own profession, I may say if a company secretary changes, it may not impact that much. But at the same point of time, the kind of role what as a company secretary, as a compliance officer he is facing. Suppose today I am not able to what's called comply with something, and because of that I am putting in my papers. It is a material information. So KMP is rightly there very much. It should be there according to me, and this is a welcome feature.
I think what Anjali pointed out is it's a very good point that it's a part to think that in such a short time span we see so many changes in KMPs and senior management. So why exactly there is such a turnover, or what is the reason behind it? Because currently they are not really giving any reasons. So I think regulators and investors also should know that what reasons these people are giving and exiting the company. So that would definitely help.
Yeah. I mean, you know, as a investor or as a person who looks into the news, it really concerns me that a founder member of the company is resigning. That is really a CFO, the person who formed the company, the person whose name was there in the offer document at the time of IPO. If that person resigns, that is a big concern for anybody who has put in the money, who's investing in the shares of the company. So those things, of course, yes, public has a right to know as to why that person is leaving.
In fact, Anjali, I don't want to name the company, but in that company, within a span of 11 months, 3 CFOs have changed.
There are cases, very right.
So there is something wrong definitely with the company, and that is the material information.
That is a material, true, agreed.
I want to deliberate on the senior management point. While of course, rest of directors and KMPs is very much relevant, but senior management.
I believe that is given because certain companies have gotten really innovative and creative. So they'll name someone as founder, and founder doesn't come in any of the definitions.
Right, I agree.
Of anything, for the matter of fact. So
no, I think that's fine. I think this is a welcome change. My only two suggestions, very quick one, and that can be just looked at. One from a privacy point of view. Yes. Let us assume that one senior management, he gives a detail, because you want everything to be detailed and submitted to the exchange as is basis. Somebody has a health condition and he has put out and submitted those papers, but you want of course as it has been drafted, the detailed information has to be pasted and posted to the exchange. So that somewhere one can look at whether are we breaching that privacy thing was somebody. And the other point would be sometimes is everything is fine, but sometimes people leave, some may be disgruntled, some of the senior, one of those cases can be also of a disgruntled employees or a senior management leaving, who may not be a good performer by himself, but then he puts in his resignation a lot of things which may not make really sense. But again, that has been put out because that's the requirement. So, I mean, just I'm saying it's a food for thought, but these 2 points just came to mind.
Yeah, I fully second what Ashish said. These 2 points should definitely be considered.
Now, these provisions are not there in the existing Schedule 3 or Regulation 30 for any delay or default in payment of fines or penalties or dues to any of the regulatory authorities or enforcement or any judicial authority is needed to be disclosed to the stock exchanges within 24 hours. Likewise, if there is a voluntary revision in financial statements or report of the board of directors, then it is needed to be intimated to the stock exchanges within 12 hours. Welcome changes should be done. In fact, I have a suggestion that with regard to voluntary revision in financial statements, it should not be like a post-mortem statement which is going. There should be advance intimation as well to the stock exchanges that a board meeting is scheduled to be held on this date for the purpose of considering revision in financial statements, because this is an important aspect. A number which has been finalized once, if you're changing it, there should be an intimation to the public at large. I think Pawan sir has joined in, just joined in. There is some signal problem. Any views from any of the speakers?
No, I think you need to mute.
Pawan sir has to mute himself.
Yeah, or somebody from here is to mute.
Can you please tell Pawan sir to mute himself?
Sorry, can one of the administrators do that? I guess not aware that he has unmuted himself.
Yeah.
I think somebody has to do it.
I'm calling him.
I think Pawan is bringing some spiritual flavor to this webinar.
Yeah.
We are getting the blessings directly from
Correct, absolutely. Right. Because I could see that, I could listen to the Har Har Mahadev and
yeah.
So he's on a pilgrimage, seems to be.
Yeah.
I think we can continue.
Yeah. We can continue. I think no any of the panelists. So welcome.
Right.
Anjali, can you?
Yeah, I'm.
Yes.
So some of those were the new inclusions. Now some of the modifications which are proposed in para A. Acquisitions under the scheme of arrangement of fresh acquisitions. This has been there in the present law as well, but the provisions are being changed. Modifications are there. So existing provision is needed to be. So present provision is any acquisition or any agreement to acquire more than 5%.
एक्चुअली में हमारी बॉडी को खाने की आदत नहीं बढ़ेगी, हम बिल्कुल ऐसे जिस तरह खाना खाते हैं थोड़े हैवी पड़ेंगे शरीर में.
So any acquisition or any agreement to acquire more than 5% of shares or voting rights in any company, or any change of more than 2% is needed to be disclosed within 24 hours. Now actually what was the need of this change? It was felt that some of the companies were not making a disclosure when they were making investments in a new company, or when they were making investments in a subsidiary. So that is why they have categorically said that in case of change, in addition to these points, if the cost of acquisition exceeds the materiality thresholds of 2% of, as given in Regulation 30, Subregulation 4, of 2% of turnover or net worth, or 5% of the PAT, this disclosure is needed to be made within 12 hours. And similarly, they have given a clarification that acquisition in an existing or a newly incorporated company is needed to be disclosed. Simultaneously, Under the present law, there is a requirement of sale or disposal of units or division or subsidiary. Now it is proposed that in addition to sale or disposal of whole or substantially whole of the undertaking or sale of stake in an associate company. The points mentioned in red are not there earlier, are not under the present in the extant law, but they are proposed. And they're simultaneously, they have defined sale or disposal of subsidiary or sale of stake in the associate company, which should include seizing the control in the subsidiary. That is fully appreciable, fully understandable. And then we are saying sale or agreeing to sell more than 2% of shares of voting rights in a subsidiary or associate company. Perfectly fine changes, we should be made applicable. But when we talk about a subsidiary, change sale of 2% maybe again little again make that would lead to too many disclosures. Basically 2% in an associate makes perfect sense, but if a company is a 98% subsidiary of mine and I'm selling 2% to some outsider, probably it may not be required. So that is the discussion views from the other speakers.
Yeah, so even I'll agree with, the 2% being a real small number, because if I have like a subsidiary wherein I hold 71%, even if I acquire 2% and it becomes 73, what, how will that be like add value to the disclosures that I have? So I think that the SEBI could consider increasing the threshold a year of 2%. It would, actually make sure that the disclosures which are coming out there are actually material.
So I believe 2% which you spoke about. So I think the sale of 2% is done to bring the provision with line with the acquisition parameters.
Yeah.
So in acquisition, yeah, we have any change of 2%. And I believe since, that provision was seen in a light that only acquisition should be disclosed. So just to make it look very uniform, I think we have come out with this 2% of sale. So if there is any change in 2%. So I think that would be one way to look at it. I think
yeah, continue.
No, if anything related to that, I think we can continue with
now, the only thing which after going through this provision, which I felt, if a subsidiary makes an allotment to some outsider, if I have a, say, 70% subsidiary and it makes an allotment, preferential allotment to some outsider, by virtue of which my holding gets reduced to 50% or any other percentage. So there is a change in my holding, but I've not sold anything.
Yeah,
probably that particular point, if that can be taken care of, because when we are talking about such a robust system of disclosing, even something like that, even a situation like that can also be covered.
So usually the scenarios, we get to see when there is some complex structure of restructuring which is being proposed, wherein, subsidiaries are involved and the listed entity is involved, and, listed entity has some stake in the subsidiary. So I think all those events can be really tapered if we are giving this disclosure requirement. If the subsidiary is selling some of its stake, which predominantly belong to the listed entity. So if those disclosures really can, help in connecting dots, because, at times we have seen some arrangement is done with a very complex structure, and at the end of the day, listed entities shares come into picture, and the price is, changed by it, and the control is being taken over and all that. So I think in order to cater to those scenarios, this might be helpful in future.
Right.
Yeah. Also for the acquisition part, I believe that has come into picture, wherein the listed entity is putting in money in its wholly owned subsidiary. Like there are multiple right issues, and the money is just flowing from the listed entity to its wholly owned subsidiary. We don't know for what. And since there is no change in the percentage, so we cannot really have an authority to go to the listed entity and ask them, why you are infusing so much money? What is the object? So I think that would really, bring the listed entity being accountable towards the investor, as in why they're flowing so much money, and what is the purpose behind it.
Yeah. That is where this cost of acquisition increasing the exceeding
exactly.
the materiality threshold is coming into picture, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Now revision in ratings. Not just the revision in ratings, even new ratings are needed to be informed to the exchanges. Again, a welcome step. But in addition to this particular point, there is a proviso that even if the rating was not requested by the company or has been withdrawn by the company, even then the disclosure is needed to be made to the exchanges. So presently we have, I think, 7 rating agencies or 6 rating agencies.
Yeah.
So meaning thereby, and because it is mentioned in the discussion paper that the rating agencies disclose on their websites as to the ratings being given to each of the companies. So that means the company is expected to go through the websites of each of these rating agencies and then inform. I am little confused as to how, if something is not something has not been requested by me, how will I be able to make a disclosure about it?
Yeah, one way to look at it is the procedure, what you said traditionally, the website of all the 6, because I believe they come out with a publication that how many ratings they have done for the day or for a given period of time. So these rating agencies are required to give that publication. So one way could be that. Also, I believe this little off the topic that stock exchange along with the rating agencies, we are planning that we'll host those publication on stock exchange website also for easier references. That is definitely in pipeline. It's in discussion. So currently, as far as listed entities are considered, I believe they'll have to go through the publication and have the knowledge whether any rating is being issued or given to the company.
Fine.
That just adding to what Tanvi said, just one. Let us say that you already in discussion with the these rating agencies, and when they will already post on in the exchanges, said then do you want also the companies to do the same? Because if that information is already available publicly on the exchange, so why also put a burden on the companies? Because it's also one has to look at ease of doing business. Compliance has to be looked at, and not it should not be at a multiple level if the same information is already out in public. So I'm just requesting, if that exchange is already in discussion, why not do that way, and one compliance can be just
I believe it's a matter of the fact on timelines, which reaches where. I think the timelines would definitely play a role. What happens first?
But Ashish, the suggestion that you are giving, then it will not be coming on the wall of the company under the corporate announcements.
Right.
Because if I want to look at whatever is going on in Dixon, so I know I have to just click on Dixon. I have to type Dixon and everything pertaining to Dixon would be there. So I think वो वाला एक suggestion मुझे थोड़ा difficult लगता है, but of course, if exchange is talking to the rating agencies, then it will be a little easier for the companies to give the disclosure.
Yeah.
Any other views?
Yeah. I think it's fine, Anjali. We can proceed.
Yeah, right. Now, frauds and defaults. So, under the present law, frauds and defaults by promoters, KMP, listed company, or arrest of any KMP or promoter have been mandated. In addition to these, anything pertaining to directors, senior management, subsidiary, or arrest of senior management or director, they are also needed to be disclosed to the exchanges. Again, it's a welcome move. All these things, any such fraud or default by any of these senior people should be disclosed to the exchanges.
Definitely, yeah.
I think this is welcome change.
Yeah. Now, para B, alteration in the general character of the business. So under the present norm, change in nature or general character, arrangements of strategic or technical or market tie-ups are needed to be disclosed, and adoption of new line of business. Change in general character of the business is proposed to be done away with, and closure of operations of subsidiary are needed to be informed to the exchange depending upon the material after applying the materiality policy of the company, and this is needed to be disclosed within 12 hours of the event. This again I feel we all should be okay with, because if any subsidiary is getting closed, the information should be going to the exchange.
Yeah.
But all subsidiaries, or shouldn't be material subsidiaries? Because let us assume that for a particular project, you would have incorporated a company, and because let's assume that nothing has taken place and you're just closing it down. So do you want that also information to emit? I'm just a thought.
I think it's
Maybe.
circling back to your materiality thresholds. So
yeah, we have to apply materiality policy, right?
Perfect.
Now, loan agreements under the present law, if the listed entity is a borrower, the disclosure is needed to be made. But it is proposed that even if the listed entity is a lender and the transaction is not in the normal course of business, the same is needed to be disclosed to the exchanges. Herein, they have mentioned that loan agreements for lending to wholly owned subsidiary of the listed entity may not be material and may not be needed to be disclosed to the exchanges. And simultaneously, they have excluded NBFCs and banks from this requirement. One particular thing which may also be excluded is when a listed company gives loan to the ESOP trusts. That is not coming in the discussion paper. That provision may also be excluded from the requirement of giving a disclosure. Rest, I feel this is again a welcome change.
Yeah, I second Anjali, but over to Tanvi with regard to ESOP trust loan.
So honestly, I'll have to check on this, because we were really concentrated on the part that if the listed entity is giving out loan, that will come under disclosure. So we were a little happy about that. But yeah, for ESOP trust, I think we are also under discussions, and we also are really coming out with something concrete to put forth. So, yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Now, cyber security. We all are living in e-age, and all are under this threat of cyber attacks at any point in time. In October 22 only, I think Tata Power reported that there has been a cyber attack in their organization. So presently, the norm is that a risk management committee, under the risk management committee framework, monitoring and review of cyber security is to be looked into. But it is proposed that merely monitoring and reviewing will not help. This should be disclosed in the quarterly CG report as well, along with the remedial actions which have been taken and the root cause analysis of any such attack. I totally second this proposal should be there.
I think it is with the time. I think yes. It's a very welcome change.
I agree too. This is something which is very relevant and critical. We should have this.
I just have a view on the timelines that they have mentioned in the quarterly CG report. Now, recently we got news of CDSL, right? So I'm not sure whether the quarterly report should be kept limited for a complete report as far as the remedial action in the root cause analysis is considered. However, I feel like there should be some disclosure, at least one disclosure under Regulation 30, which goes on a timely basis, like either 24 hours or something of that sort, wherein the company would at least come out with the fact that, yeah, we have faced cyber attack, and the detailed analysis will be given as per the prescribed timeline. That is, I believe, in the quarterly CG report. So that would really help in settling the market and the unrest among the investors, because they are really not aware whether the cyber attack has been mitigated or where it is standing. So I think if it's impacting the company, like some tech company or some intermediary company, so I think it would be really appreciated if the disclosures are given in timely fashion and not like.
Tanvi, it is already there in the listing regulations that apart from para A, para B, if the
Yeah,
board feels that any kind of event, if it is a materially going to impact the share price, they have to inform that exchanges about that. And I'm
Definitely.
sure that if there is a cyber attack, it is the responsibility of the board to inform the exchanges immediately and to disseminate that information if it is going to have material impact on its price.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry, you were saying something?
No, please proceed.
Yeah. So this is just a crux of whatever changes with regard to the 24 hours or 12 hours. This is just a summary of it. I would want to skip it. Maybe in our next webinar, when the actual amendments come, we'll want to discuss this in more detail. These are the key events which have to be disclosed within how many hours. This is all about the changes that have come in.
Great, Anjali. Thank you so much.
Over to the Q&A session.
I think only one thing, Anjali, you have, if I'm not wrong, your message is about the financial obligations. And in fact, there is one about that also, the guarantees, indemnities, securities. They have used the word by whatever name it is called. Okay. Any kind of financial obligations also, they have to inform the exchanges about the materiality this thing is concerned. I think if I'm not wrong.
In the loan wala provision.
Then a loan is different, Anjali, that financial obligations are different. Okay.
Okay.
In this financial obligations, what they say is sometimes, people are playing with that word guarantee and securities. They say that non-binding, or some kind of undertakings are being given to the banks and the creditors and all. So what I think if I'm not wrong, the regulator wants is you may call it with whatever the name you want to have it. But the moment you incur a financial obligation, you have to inform that.
I think para 11.
Yeah, yes. Correct. That is very important. In fact, okay, that thing.
Okay. I think I've missed. Yes.
Thank you very much, Anjali.
Thank you for
Much. We have received some comments and some queries from our participants. Sakarji, whether last audited financial statements mean last audited quarter for the current quarter?
No, sir. I will always take it. Last audited financial statement means last year, not last quarter.
Absolutely.
But Mr. Sudhakar, in case the company follows the practice of having quarterlies as well, the quality as audited numbers.
No. You see, you may be having it, Anjali.
As on the last financial year.
But that is called as quarterly audited financial statements. They are not. Yeah.
That
here
is
the word is last audited financial statements means it is yearly, not quarterly.
Right.
Anjali, do the companies need to disclose every transaction beating the fact that the same is carried out in ordinary course of business?
So, sir, if anything is falling within the ambit of para A, whether the present one or proposed one, we'll have to disclose. For para B, materiality policy is to be applied.
And this is a comment. Materiality should be with respect to impact on share price. A capital expenditure could exceed the threshold limit, which will not immediately have any impact on the share price. This is a comment we'll take into account. Threshold for determining materiality should be 10% of the consolidated turnover. We've already discussed that.
Yeah.
In case of companies giving inadequate disclosure, stock exchanges need to raise queries. For instance, in the case of disclosures relating to acquisition, many companies had not disclosed cost of acquisition, merely stating that it is confidential, despite it being specific requirement. However, no action has been taken by stock exchanges. This prompts other companies also to follow the same. Tanvi, you like to say something?
Have been been dealing with such scenarios, and the reply which we have gotten, we have actually elaboratedly discussed with SEBI also. When the company comes out with any acquisition, usually these are huge companies that we're talking about. I believe acquisition with respect to small companies are not really looked into so critically. But these huge companies, when they're acquiring some, say, a company outside India or something of that in India for their business, so the cost, it's a very competitive and deciding factor. So when they really come out with that, so they have told us that our competitors will have a leverage over it, or we would, in layman's language, we would expose our business strategies on that matter of fact. So as a regulator, we don't really give leeway to all companies, but we thoroughly check the fact. And once we get a go that, okay, this is an exceptional case, we make sure that in the disclosure, it is mentioned that it is kept confidential for a certain reason. And then only we, I believe, let go on these mandatory requirements. So yeah, it's a very case-to-case basis analysis. It's not like we'll give away, just exception to every person saying that it is confidential. They should prove it that it is confidential, and it is supposed to be kept confidential to that extent. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, this is a two thresholds may be impracticable, as net worth or average 3 years profits may be negative as well.
So I believe absolute value has been mentioned. So I think the negative sign will be done with. Yeah.
Then the comments on time zone, of course, that is an issue raised by our panelists also.
In fact, Tanvi, one thing, if you can also just explain that what is meant by absolute values from regulator point of view, because in fact, I have been also asked by 1 or 2 people yesterday that what is this absolute values in the profit and loss account means. So you may clarify from regulator point of view.
So currently, since there is no definition as such, okay, so we are just going ahead with an understanding that if, for example, there are subsequent losses, so no matter what value you derive, it's going to be a loss. So if your event is having an impact of, say, 1 lakh, it might result in it being into material event. However, that should not be the case. So I believe by absolute value, we can take an understanding as it is a value apart from the negative sign. So if your value is coming as say 1,000 lakh something negative, so just go away with the negative, see the value. If your agreement is exceeding that, then give the disclosure. I believe that should be the approach.
Thank you.
Yeah. An interesting comment. Please consider PSU's perspective also, as a lot of approvals needed before dissemination of information.
We are circling back to the timelines of the disclosure. Yes, yes.
If a director of KMP is arrested for something done in his personal capacity, will the company be required to disclose? Ashish?
I don't think that's the intent of this regulation, but I would also request Tanvi to chip in, because as far as I read it, I don't think that's the intent.
So there are multiple provisions around the arrest of KMP. So I believe one provision says doesn't really link it with the listed entity, I believe. So I think
so when it comes to arrest, I think that's a big thing.
Correct. Absolutely. In fact, Anjali, you said it. Say, for example, whether it is a personal case, suppose if a director involved in narcotics thing or a molestation, all these issues are very, very sensitive. These are no more personal issues, because when a person is a director of a company, he is holding a very responsible position. Yes. But at the same point of time, you have to see the material impact. And the moment it triggers Regulation 30, you have to inform it.
Yeah. So there is a provision which separates it from the impact on the listed entity. Even in personal capacity, someone is arrested. They should be
Yeah,
excluded.
that's what I was referring to, that provision. Yeah, correct. Otherwise, though, what Mr. Sudhakar said is absolutely makes sense.
In respect of
Sir, only just one more minute. I want to add one more thing also. You see, in fact, in one of the directors, recently somebody asked me a question that one of the directors have defaulted in repayment of his house loan. Okay. And whether it is to be informed or not. I said that, look, if that amount is a big amount and if he has defaulted, it is going to have an impact on your price, because the intention, that the character of that person itself is in doubt. Okay, if he is not able to discharge his personal obligations, tomorrow he may indulge something in the company also. So for these kind of questions, we cannot answer it across the webinar. It is the responsibility of the company secretary to see that is it triggering regulation 30. If it triggers, by all means, in fact, I still remember that, I'm forgetting the name of that BSc, he used to say that when in doubt, disclose it. When in doubt, disclose it.
We say it on all calls. We say this.
I want to extend
this is
this
a very
point.
common, yeah.
This is exchange is very common.
See, in fact, not only that, sometimes as company secretaries, if we have to have a peaceful sleep, we may have to convince our managements, though it is very easy to say these things. Sometimes people say it is very easy to say, but the days are like this. The kind of responsibilities with which we have been entrusted upon as compliance officers, we have to make our efforts, at least sincere efforts we have to make it. Without making the effort also, if we say that, then only God only can save us.
But I want to bring a slightly different perspective here. It is a home loan and a default. For sure, it has to go away because it's an impact. But what about if I have forgotten making a credit card payment on a due date? It's a default. Ultimately, it's a default. Now, how will you see this situation? That is
Shweta,
one.
I will, if he is a chronicle defaulter.
Yeah.
See, one-off default is always okay. If he is a chronicle defaulter and that, his name started appearing in the blacklist of that, this thing, then of course, it is going to affect the image of the company. And if he is a CEO of the company or a managing director and he is a, what's called as I'm a habitual defaulter, definitely you have to know.
So that kind of a clarity should be built in the guidelines. And of course, there is a linked point wherein in a para B point number 9, it says fraud or default, etc. by the employees of listed entity. So here the audience is absolutely large, that even if it is default by any of your employee, that is also getting covered.
No, Shweta, again, it's
But
10
also
materiality impact. Shweta, you have to take materiality.
And secondly, I feel that it should be pertaining to the listed company, and not in their personal capacity. Yeah.
Employee of listed company, but listed company also have a lot many employees. I understand.
I agree.
KMP and a senior management, you can have that kind of a visibility, but having a complete database of your employees and their defaults is something practically not possible.
See, for example, there is a fund manager in case of mutual funds. He may not be a KMP. Sometimes he falls under the senior management category, definitely. But suppose, say, for example, if that mutual fund is defining it in such a way that he is not falling in that. For a moment, let us assume it. But still, he is an employee. And he is making some kind of this kind of defaults and all those things. You have to inform it.
So
because he is the fund manager. Yeah.
So I have a different way to look at it. Then in such situation, you cannot have all employees or a complete senior management coming into the same situation. Then we can have critical people identified beyond KMPs and board members, like a next leg, which the board will determine. So the obligation can be placed on the board to decide that who all are the key people, and from that basis, their transactions or their defaults or their resignations can definitely be going to the market.
Now a time has come, the way the amendments have been proposed in this particular discussion paper, it is imperative for the companies to define who are the senior management. You have to define it. Yes. Whether it is one level below the board, you will call it as, or HODs or whatever you may say that, but it is imperative for the companies to define the position of senior management.
There is a comment, and I want the views of Tanvi or Anjali. In respect of entities in the financial sector, annual inspection by RBI is a regular feature, does it also contemplate disclosure?
So I believe, like we discussed earlier, that if any search or investigation is undertaken in normal course of business, then how to look upon it. So I believe the regulation doesn't really intend to catch those events, but the exceptional events. However, yeah, a comment would be appreciated. We can definitely raise it.
Because even I had this thought that if a merchant banker is listed or if a broker is listed, they have annual inspections from SEBI.
Yeah.
So will it be required to be disclosed on a regular basis? But my understanding again is the same, that should not be.
Yeah, proposal could be like any search or investigation apart from done in normal course of business.
So this would also be applicable for pharma companies, because in pharma companies also FDA inspections are very common, and not only in India but from every other country where the drug is being sold. So for them it would be like, I don't know how many number of inspections would be going on at various manufacturing facilities. So I think this should be something that the industry should represent on, to exclude that if they are in regular or routine nature or something, that is an annual thing, could be excluded from disclosure requirement.
Yeah.
See, according to me, there is a difference between inspection and investigation. So regular, I mean, the inspections which are in the ordinary course of business, whether RBI inspection or FDA inspection, these kind of things, they're all routine. But investigation, when it takes place, suppose if RBI is investigating an NBFC company, then it is a serious matter. That may trigger the regulation 30.
But Tanvi, having said that, in case there is a negative outcome to the inspection, then I think that should be disclosed.
I believe so, yeah.
Yes, yes.
So a little more clarity built in the guidelines would be helpful.
Right.
Now, there is a comment that changes in senior management personnel, resignations are covered, but what about inter-seat transfers within the same group?
Yeah, so actually here there are 2 points. One is a resignation point, which is a separate point, and then there is also a requirement to disclose change. And a change could mean everything. It could mean transfers, it could mean resignations, and so on and so forth. So I think there are these 2 provisions which are going on simultaneously. So SEBI should probably think of this. And I think the requirement, if they are also saying about change, so they are expecting you to disclose the change also, in case of whether it is inter-se transfer into another department or secondment to a subsidiary, whatever it is. If it comes as change, you will be required to disclose. Here, however, there is one point which is on the resignation, which I was just seeing as a matter of comment somebody had put in, and is linked to this only. Whether the date of resignation should be considered as the time for disclosure, or should it be cessation of employment? Because there could also be a situation wherein a senior management personnel probably tenders his resignation and goes on through some negotiation and may eventually decide to withdraw. Just by putting up this disclosure requirement, it should not be like some roadblock which comes in this discussion. So that is also something that SEBI could think about, whether it should be the date of cessation or it should be resignation date.
I think they've mentioned 7 days of resignation.
Yeah.
So date of resignation would be the trigger point for
so
7 days.
The point is that should not be the event for disclosure. It should rather be the cessation, because that is that sort of confirms a finality and not date of resignation.
And we must be coming across it while intimating resignation of KMP. Generally, they say for personal reasons, for career growth.
Yeah.
Efficient for the regulator.
Actually, this is a bigger chunk that we have recently started noticing, that it is understanding, like Saloni mentioned, that the cessation should be the deciding factor. However, we are on the contrary side, wherein we feel that the day when the resignation letter is being tendered, so the company should just come ahead and disclose it. And if there is any subsequent change, a subsequent disclosure can come into effect. Now, why this is been looked upon is because we have come across grievances submitted by these KMPs that we want out of the company, but the company is not doing so. And we have really faced big instances, big cases wherein the resignation was being held, and the person was not released from the duties, and subsequently another listed entity hires that person, and then it's a big confusion and a huge case to resolve at regulators end. So just to avoid these things, if the companies just give a disclosure that we have received a resignation and we are still in discussion, and we'll intimate the exchange as on date the board approves or it reaches its finality, I believe that would really give us a complete circle for that matter of fact, and it would reduce such grievances faced by people in individual capacity. So that could be one approach also.
Not the date of cessation.
Yeah.
Comments that threshold limit should be 10%. We've already discussed that. Disclosure in case of sale or disposal of subsidiary stake in associate company should only be required if listed entity is seizing control in the subsidiary or associate company, or lose status of associate company post disposal of stake. What is your?
I think we all earlier discussed that the provision is brought to bring it in line with the acquisition provisions, the 2%. And yeah, we have seen that there have been some reaping acquisitions, some reaping sales, which don't really come under the purview. And then one day there is some news about some subsidiary or some project being taken away by listed entity, which was one of the profitable venture of the listed entity. So just to avoid such instances, I think the provision is being brought in for review.
There is a small query. Loan given by holding company to subsidiary, which is not a wholly owned subsidiary, should it be intimated to the exchange?
So I guess Tanvi clarified this earlier.
Yeah.
That is something that they're looking forward to.
The regulations are pretty clear. Only wholly owned subsidiary loan given to wholly owned subsidiary is something that they have
exempted.
Yeah.
If a promoter is listed company, whether the listed subsidiary would still be required to disclose the actions initiated by regulated authorities against the listed promoter entity?
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we have covered more or less all the comments or suggestions received. My present duty to conclude now. We have had very whatever views we have received from the press by all of you. We will collate all these views and then forward to SEBI for its consideration. I wish to thank each one of you, Sudhakar ji, Ashish ji, Saloni, Shweta, and Anjali and Neeti. A special thanks to Tanvi, who has clarified, intervened in almost all the all points. Thank you very much. It is your support which keeps us going and keeps us motivating in going ahead with our journey of organizing webinars.
Also, before you conclude, I must place on record my appreciation as a moderator. You have excellently moderated and sharp at 18 hours, that is 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. You have winded up the program. At the same point of time, on a personal note, I have really delighted to be with the young panel like Saloni, Shweta, Tanvi, Ashish, and even Neeti from corporate professionals, apart from our senior colleague Anjali. At the same point of time, I must also really appreciate Tanvi, especially from a regulator side. For the first time, I have seen a regulator with such a clarity of mind. She had given the rationale for every proposal. And without saying that, I will look back and I will come back to you and all those things, she has given across the table whatever the regulator's mind is concerned. Tanvi, I must appreciate, congratulate you for this thing. Keep it up, this kind of an approach as a regulator. You have a long way to go. I really pray God to bless you with many more higher positions as far as a regulator. Your mindset is very, very clear. I'm really happy about that. Thank you very much to every one of you.
I'm really obliged.
Right,
Just
totally veto Mr. Sudhakar's views.
yeah, I totally second. I think very with a lot of clarity this point.
Thank you so much.
I absolutely agree with Mr. Sudhakar. Thank you so much, corporate professional, for organizing such event where we are actually exchanging thoughts. We are learning from each other on the journey of being a better professional.
If I may add,
from my side, just one thing for you, Tanvi, the real mantle would be conveying the, the recommendations and suggestions which are coming in from the industry, and really conveying it, the practical aspect of all of these disclosures, etc., to the regulator. While the intent is, fairly out there, and we really appreciate you coming up here and patiently conveying it to us. But, now the whole influencing bit, if NSE could, really take that up, it would, be a welcome change for us.
Definitely. To start with, thank you, corporate professionals. Talking on behalf of NSE, I would definitely say that we really want make efforts to reach out to public and reach out to listed entities and stakeholders to knowledge them about these regulations, regulatory provisions, and everything. So kudos to corporate professionals for taking this initiative. We highly appreciate it. And as far as NEC is considered, we look forward to, and we have all the support for all the webinars you guys have organized. And thank you so much for having us on board. And we are always here. You can reach us anytime, and we'll definitely try to help out.
Thank you very much, Tanvi, and thank you all the learned panelists. And my special thanks to all the participants who attended today's program. And as I said, our journey will continue. Our next webinar will be, as you know, the first Friday of every month. We have a program on regulatory and updates. There are quite a few updates. You all know. Even LODR, some amendments have already been made. There are other changes also. ICDR changes are there. Insider trading changes have come. So we'll have the next webinar on next Friday, 4 to 6. Please join us and keep encouraging us. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all the speakers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you all.